A step forward for New Zealand's relations with India. The Prime Minister, Christopher Luxon, is in Laos for the East Asia Summit, where today he met with India's Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, who invited him to visit India in the new year. Luxon says New Zealand's relationship with India is moving in the direction, with the two discussing trade and other ways to work together. Pre-election National pledged to secure a free trade deal with India, but this is the first face-to-face the Prime Ministers have had. International geopolitical analyst Geoffrey Miller joins me now on this. Good evening, Geoffrey.
Good evening, Francesca.
What have they talked about in this meeting?
Look, I think this is the first face-to-face meeting, so it will be very much about getting to know each other and just setting the ground for that visit by Christopher Luxon to India, which is going to come early next year. So I guess that was the real win to come out of this meeting, the confirmation of an invitation to visit India for Christopher Luxon.
It's really just an opportunity to say, yes, we'd be happy to have some conversations in the future, isn't it, Geoffrey?
Essentially, yes, it's the beginning of the conversation, and a free trade deal is a very long way away. This is a marathon, not a sprint, when it comes to India. I mean, Christopher Luxon is right to focus on India as one of his foreign policy priorities. He makes the point that India is going to be the third biggest economy by 2030. It's already the world's most populous nation. It's the leader, arguably, of the global south. So, yes, India should absolutely be in the mix. At the same time, India's the two-way trade that New Zealand has with India is less than 10% of what New Zealand has with China, and that's a relationship which is hugely important to New Zealand. And yet Christopher Luxon didn't have a meeting with his Chinese counterpart in Laos. And Winston Peters didn't meet with his Chinese counterpart at the UN a couple of weeks ago, unlike Australia's Penny Wong. So I think that perhaps there's a crisis brewing when it comes to New Zealand's engagement, or lack thereof, with China, because there's absolutely no visit on the horizon for Christopher Luxon to China, or a visit even by Winston Peters, the foreign minister. And we're 1 year into this government now. I find that quite concerning.
Okay, do you think that this meeting takes a bit of a focus off our relationship with China?
Well, look, it's clear that this government wants to refocus New Zealand's international relations. We've seen the move towards Australia, the United States, the fact that New Zealand is becoming interested in joining Pillar 2 of AUKUS. So that's the context we're operating in. And clearly, China is something that is a bit difficult to handle for New Zealand. We had that very positive visit by Li Qiang, the Chinese Premier, back in June. But since then, Christopher Luxon has actually taken a fairly hawkish turn. You would say he attended the NATO summit in July. He gave quite a hawkish speech to the Lowy Institute in Sydney back in August, and also hiked visa fees. Now, those apply to all nationals, but China's one of our biggest tourism markets, and I think they would have taken it as something of a slight, given that they provided visa-free access to New Zealand's citizens for tourism at that meeting back in June when Li Qiang, the Chinese Premier, came to New Zealand. So I think there's a crisis brewing in some ways with China. I think New Zealand really needs to step up its engagement with China, while not overlooking opportunities of the future when it comes to India.
And you can do both, right? I mean, you know, as you say, it's always a bit difficult and a fine line dealing with China, but they are an important trade partner. And look, we have to be able to do hard things, Geoffrey, don't we? You can't just go, oh, that's a bit difficult.
Indeed, and absolutely that's the truth here. Look, New Zealand has $38 billion worth of two-way trade with China. They're our biggest trading partner by far. I find it quite concerning that it was not a priority to meet with Li Qiang at the East Asia Summit and rebalance New Zealand's relations to some degree. New Zealand's it's often said that New Zealand plays this, walks this tightrope, or has this balancing act, but there's not a lot of balancing up going on at the moment. It seems to be largely one-way traffic. New Zealand diversifying its relations away from China. That is a big risk for New Zealand. I think if New Zealand doesn't get its relations with China back on an even keel, at some point there may be some repercussions for New Zealand to face.
Any other outtakes from the summit that you have, Geoffrey?
Well, I thought one comment was really interesting by Christopher Luxon at the media stand-up today, and that was he had absolutely no intention of meeting Sergey Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, at the meeting. I think that's really interesting when you look at this wider context of Christopher Luxon being happy to meet Narendra Modi, the Indian Prime Minister, because Of course, India talks to everyone. India has good relations with Russia, good relations with Western countries overall. I think New Zealand is a small state, absolutely has the power to play this role in terms of dialogue, diplomacy, de-escalation. And actually, I don't think it's that helpful to just say, I don't want to talk to Sergey Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, while he's got the opportunity to do so. I think he should, and put New Zealand's position when it comes to war in Ukraine, and at least have a conversation and keep some dialogue open with Russia while he had the opportunity. I mean, you can argue he shouldn't go out of his way to meet his Russian counterparts, but I think it's a bit silly actually just to say no, I don't want to go and talk to him. Okay. I won't talk to him at all while I'm here.
Okay. And look, finally, do you think Christopher Luxon is meeting with more global counterparts than Chris Hipkins did, or is my memory just fading, or is it also because he's just sort of new in the PM seat?
Well, I went through the list of his foreign trips this year that Christopher Luxon has made, and we're up to already, I think, trip number 11, which is quite, I think it's quite something. Or it might be over the year since he became Prime Minister. It might include those ones at the end of last year. But either way, that's a significant number of trips, and it's quite clear that Christopher Luxon does prioritise international relations and foreign policy. I think that's a good thing for New Zealand. I think it's good that Winston Peters, of course, is prioritising travelling as well. He's tried to get to every country in the Pacific Islands Forum. I think he's managed all of the countries now, or territories apart from New Caledonia, but I'm sure you'll get there in the coming year. So I think it is very good to prioritise just getting out there, and especially after all that COVID period where New Zealand just wasn't getting out there and travelling enough when it comes to our Prime Minister and Foreign Minister.
Appreciate your thoughts, Jeffrey. Really nice to talk to you. That was international geopolitical analyst Jeffrey Miller. It is 21 past 6. You're with Newstalk ZB. Right, direct.